Hello everyone, welcome back to Dewey's Ghost Story YouTube channel. I hope you all enjoyed today's thrilling ghost story. Thank you all very much. Now let's dive into today's episode, number 160. Today's story begins with a plea for help from a 21-year-old man. He messaged Dewey, sharing that from a young age until now, he has always loved wearing silky pants and long dresses. His mother is a teacher, and she always wore long dresses to work. Since childhood, whenever he saw his mother buying or wearing long dresses, he was very fond of them, especially the silky pants. So, for a long time, he secretly wore these clothes at home without his family knowing. It wasn't until high school that his secret was discovered. From grades 10 to 12, female students wore long dresses every Monday. During this time, he felt two things: envy towards the girls who could wear long dresses and a strong desire to wear them himself. Despite being a boy, he secretly wore long dresses at home. Every Monday morning, he hated going to school because all the girls wore long dresses, and he couldn't bear it. The feeling was indescribable. He envied others because he couldn't wear long dresses openly and could only do so secretly in his room. Additionally, he felt a strong attraction to these dresses, even wanted to have a relationship with them. By grade 11, he started saving money to secretly tailor some long dresses for himself. When his father found out, he was beaten and scolded heavily, accused of being abnormal. In grade 12, his mother discovered him wearing a long dress in his room while looking in the mirror. She didn't scold him, but she cried a lot, thinking he was possessed by a spirit. She took him to the temple for monks to perform a ritual to remove the spiritual attachment. The monks confirmed he was heavily possessed and performed the ritual. After a month, he felt better and less envious, but he still had a strong desire to secretly wear long dresses at home. He insisted he was not LGBT, claiming to be a straight male who liked girls, but he couldn't understand why he was so obsessed with long dresses. Over the years, after his family discovered his secret, his mother took him to many places seeking help, but the desire remained. He was still fascinated by long dresses, envying girls who wore them, and always wanting to wear them publicly himself, despite being attracted to girls. He hopes Dewey shares this story to find someone with experience related to this issue. Music. Next to this piece of land was an empty plot. Seeing this, his grandmother decided to move the pot to the vacant land to cook corn, as it was more convenient and no one would complain. The pot was placed at the edge of the land. While gathering firewood, his mother needed to relieve herself, so she asked her grandmother to accompany her deeper into the area. The land was overgrown with plants due to neglect. While they were there, both his mother and grandmother heard a woman's song. The singing was soft but audible. His grandmother guessed the source of the singing was further inside. After his mother finished, they looked in the direction of the sound and saw a woman clearly dressed in a purple traditional outfit with white pants. Although the grandmother couldn't see her face clearly, she noticed the woman had two sharp fangs, recognizing her as a ghost immediately. The grandmother told your mother to sit down, recalling that in the old days, people advised that if you encounter a ghost, don't scream. Wait until there's a dog nearby that barks, and the ghost will leave on its own. So immediately, the grandmother told your mother to bury her face in her chest. Next to the land was Mrs. Two's house, where she kept several dogs. However, these dogs were asleep and didn't bark. Both grandmother and mother were very frightened because they knew someone was trying to scare them. Grandmother saw some dry branches on the ground and deliberately broke them to make noise. This caused the dogs next door to bark loudly, and the woman suddenly turned away and disappeared, seemingly scared of the barking. The mother and daughter ran straight home, leaving the pot of corn behind. They told Uncle Hi and Uncle Bob about it and felt less scared. This short story was about the grandmother being scared by a woman wearing a purple dress. Later, when Uncle Hi got married and had 2 children, both he and his wife worked until late. Every night, Aunt Hi would go to the water pond in front of the house to wash clothes by hand, as there was no washing machine then. On one such night, Aunt Hi came home late, took care of the kids, and went out to wash clothes. After washing, she let her hair down, looking disheveled. and started hitting the kids, making them cry loudly. Unfortunately, Uncle wasn't home that night. A relative living nearby came over to borrow a spray bottle for the fields the next morning. Seeing Aunt Hi's disheveled state and her hitting the kids, the relative suspected Aunt Hi was possessed after washing clothes at the pond. With no one else at home, the relative contacted Aunt Hi's father to take her to Fan Rang to see a spiritual healer. That night, they took Aunt Hi to her hometown to find the healer, who lived nearby. Throughout the journey, Aunt Hi kept hitting the relative, but the relative endured it, knowing Aunt Hi was heavily possessed. When they arrived, Aunt Hi's father gave her a protective amulet to wear, hoping it would calm her down. After putting on the amulet, they took her to the healer's house, but she refused to enter, screaming outside. The healer decided to visit Aunt Hi's house instead. They took Aunt Hi back home, where she finally calmed down. The healer asked Aunt Hi to go to the pond, where she usually washed clothes, and instructed everyone to stand away. The healer brought his tools and performed a ritual at the pond. You secretly watched and saw the healer with a long sword made of old coins. After the ritual, Aunt Hi collapsed, and a foul-smelling black liquid flowed from her body. Everyone could smell it. The healer said it was fortunate they brought her in time, as another day would have been fatal. Once the liquid was expelled, Aunt Hi gradually regained consciousness, but looked pale as if drained of blood. She didn't remember the incident, but returned to normal behavior. After this ordeal, Aunt Hi's family decided she shouldn't wash clothes outside anymore. They bought her a washing machine to use indoors. Aunt Hi's financial situation was difficult, which is why she washed clothes outside. If she had the money, she would have bought a washing machine earlier. The reasons behind Aunt Hi's possession weren't shared. Then, Aunt Nom faced a similar situation when she was young and newly married. Aunt Nom's neighborhood is still quite sparse, with houses spaced far apart. Uncle Nom works from early morning until late at night, leaving Aunt Nom alone at home all day. One day, as usual, Uncle Nom hadn't returned yet, and in the late afternoon, Aunt Nom was busy in the kitchen preparing dinner. While cooking, she heard a man's voice coming from the front door, calling her name directly. "Hugh, are you home?" Thinking it was someone familiar, Aunt Nom responded, "Who's calling?" She answered with just that one sentence and was immediately affected. After responding, she left the pot of rice and went to see who was calling her. When she reached the front door, she saw an elderly man, around 60 or 70 years old, wearing traditional Cham clothing and a scarf. As soon as Aunt Nom saw him, she fainted and remembered nothing after that. Fortunately, Uncle Nom returned home early that day, around 6 p.m. Upon arriving home, Uncle Nom found Aunt Nom standing by the refrigerator at the back of the house, rummaging through it. When she saw Uncle Nom, her eyes turned red as she emptied the fridge, nearly breaking it. Uncle Nom tried to talk to her, but she didn't respond, just stood there with red eyes. Frightened, Uncle Nom took out his old phone and called your uncle and grandma for help. When everyone arrived, they helped Aunt Nom onto a hammock. Meanwhile, Uncle Nom borrowed a neighbor's motorcycle to go to Fan Rang to seek help from a spiritual teacher. While Uncle Nom was out, only Grandma and Aunt Nom were at home. Aunt Nom seemed normal but didn't speak to anyone. Grandma knew Aunt Nom was possessed, so she immediately took her to the back of the house and played Buddhist chants on the radio. Grandma waited at the front for Uncle Nom to return with the teacher. A while later, Grandma noticed an elderly man outside, wearing Cham clothing. He looked at her and then struck the radio playing the Buddhist chants, breaking it. Grandma wasn't scared. She ran to the back where Aunt Nom was lying, but the elderly man was gone and the radio was broken. All she could do was watch over Aunt Nom and wait for Uncle Nom to return with the teacher. Around midnight, the teacher arrived with Uncle Nom. Upon entering the house, the teacher immediately understood the situation but couldn't perform a ceremony at that hour. He advised everyone to wait until 10 a.m. the next day. At 10 a.m., the teacher asked Aunt Nom to enter a room alone with him. He recited something, and those outside could hear, but not clearly. Afterward, he requested Grandma to prepare a bowl of porridge and 3 dried fish. Once the offerings were ready, The teacher explained that the spirit was a powerful charm sorcerer. Due to its strength, the teacher needed 3 more hours to work in the room. Those outside waited anxiously, hearing sounds of struggle. After several hours, the teacher emerged and revealed that the land where the couple built their house was atop the grave of a charm sorcerer. The sorcerer had died long ago, but the couple unknowingly built their house there, prompting the spirit's disturbance. The only solution was to dismantle the house and move elsewhere, as the spirit didn't want them living there. The teacher pleaded with the spirit to spare the couple, promising they would relocate. However, the spirit refused to relent because Aunt Nom inadvertently responded to it, allowing it to possess her. The teacher drew a protective charm on Aunt Nom's neck, and the couple had to move immediately. Once settled in a new, smaller house due to limited funds, there was a plum tree nearby that bore many fruits. On the first night in the new house, Aunt Nom dreamt of a fierce-looking woman at the base of the plum tree, who entered the room and demanded Aunt Nom leave her land. Aunt Nom fell asleep again, recalling the dream the next morning but dismissing it as a mere dream. However, over time while Aunt Nom slept, at noon, outside on the hammock behind the house, Nom saw that this road led straight into the house, and the person seemed very bold, as if saying, "This is my house, so I can enter it." This person came in and grabbed Annie's hammock, shaking it, causing her to startle. When Aunt Nom was startled, she saw this person standing in front of her, shouting directly, "You must leave my house. Why are you still here after I've yelled at you?" At that moment, Aunt Nom was truly scared. After that afternoon nap, she went over to the neighbor's house and asked, "Why do I keep getting chased away from my own house?" The neighbors advised Aunt Nom to pour dirty laundry water at the base of the plum tree because they suspected that the woman was residing there. Aunt Nom followed their advice the next morning, pouring murky laundry water straight onto the plum tree. That night, while sleeping, Aunt Nom suddenly woke up without anyone calling her. In that moment, she looked out the door and saw the woman lying on the motorcycle parked outside. Her hair was long and draped over the handlebars. Aunt Nom was so frightened she fainted, and her husband, who was sleeping next to her, also woke up and fainted upon seeing the woman. After they regained consciousness, they were in such a panic that they screamed loudly. The neighbors came over to check on them, and Uncle Nom opened the door to let them in, explaining the eerie sight of the woman on the motorcycle. The neighbors suggested that Uncle Nom call a spiritual master to perform a ritual because the woman was haunting the house, making it impossible for them to live there. Remembering the master who had previously helped Aunt Nom, Uncle Nom quickly contacted him to come the next morning. When the master arrived, he explained that the fault lay with the couple for not properly honoring the spirits residing in the house. They had poured dirty water on the plum tree without permission. The master advised them to cut down the tree, and he performed a ritual from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Afterward, he instructed them to dispose of all the offerings, as they were tainted. Following the ritual, the master asked the spirit to leave the couple alone, and since then, Aunt and Uncle Nom's house has been peaceful, without any strange occurrences. The next story was shared by a young man who has been following Duy for a long time. He decided to share a short story hoping to encourage people to avoid traveling late at night, especially on National Highway N2. This young man's hometown is in Kianjiang. On May 14th, he planned to travel to Saigon on his motorcycle, intending to leave the next afternoon. However, he ended up drinking with friends and slept until around 11:30 p.m. He decided to travel to Saigon that night, thinking there would be fewer vehicles and the weather would be cooler without the sun. On the road, he noticed white paint marks, indicating recent or frequent accidents. Feeling scared, he sped up. Glancing to the right, he saw an older woman, around 40 to 50 years old, dressed entirely in red, like a bride's gown. Realizing it was a ghost, or even a demon, he remembered the old belief that ghosts wear white and demons wear red. It was past midnight, and the road was deserted, making the sight even more chilling. Terrified, he accelerated, passing through an area surrounded by graves. On both sides, there were old graves nearby, and far away in the fields. As he rode, he couldn't help but look around, seeing the person sitting on the horse's head was the woman from earlier, wearing a red dress. She was sitting close to the road, and you noticed her eyes were completely black with no pupils. At that moment, you were so scared you wanted to abandon your bike and run away. However, you tried to stay calm, chanting prayers as you rode until you reached a more populated area, which made you feel slightly safer. Eventually, you made it back to Saigon safely. 3 men decided to enter a nearby cemetery to find a grave and perform a seance. They chose the grave of a recently deceased person who had died in an accident, leaving only half of their body intact. The 3 men were experienced in conducting seances and weren't afraid of contacting spirits to get lottery numbers, as it was their profession. During their first seance, the spirit of the deceased woman appeared and gave them a number, telling them if they won, they must offer her a pair of eyes. The men thought nothing of it, as they could easily obtain eyes from a mortuary. The next day, they won 200 million and promptly bought 2 pairs of eyes from a hospital morgue to offer to the woman's grave. Having found the first seance easy, the men decided to try again. However, this time, the woman demanded a pair of human legs, as her child had died in an accident and lost their legs. The men hesitated because obtaining legs was more difficult than finding eyes. Eventually, they managed to acquire the legs, likely from unclaimed bodies sold through underground channels. After making the offering, they won over $1 billion each. The third seance saw the woman demanding a right hand and a right foot, as she had lost half of her body in an accident. The men returned to the hospital to find these parts, but could only get a right hand and a left foot. Despite this, they made the offering and won a substantial amount again. However, despite their winnings, they were heavily in debt due to their extravagant lifestyle, so they needed more money. For the fourth seance, only 2 men went, as the third had other commitments. The woman appeared again, giving them numbers but also demanding 2 human lives so she and her child could reincarnate. Shocked, the men realized this meant they would have to kill 2 people. Unable to commit such a crime, they overturned the seance table and ran home, terrified, never to gamble again. If you don't find 2 other lives, then those 2 lives must belong to those 2 guys. According to what the guy who was drinking coffee with your friend said, both of those guys who went to the seance ended up having accidents. Both died completely. As for the guy who didn't go to the seance, he also had a car accident the next day. Although he didn't die, his right arm was crushed by a truck, and now he is disabled and mentally unstable, like he's paying a price. According to that guy's conclusion, the 2 lives that had to be paid for were those of the 2 guys who attended the seance on Wednesday. They were destined to pay with their lives. After hearing this story, Duy found it somewhat hard to believe because buying human body parts from a morgue isn't that easy. Although Duy doesn't know if this story is true or not, it teaches us a lesson that we shouldn't participate in seances or exploit the unseen for personal gain. It's something we shouldn't do at all. And with that, we've concluded today's story. Before ending, don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to support Duy. Now, let's look forward to more interesting stories next time. Goodbye, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel Ghost Stories with Uncle Duy. I hope you enjoyed today's thrilling ghost stories. Thank you all so much. Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Now, let's dive into today's stories. The first story today is about omens, especially those given to long-distance truck drivers. This story was recounted by a young woman who shared the tragic accident of her father, a long-distance truck driver transporting fruits along the north-south route, frequently crossing the High Van Pass. Her father, born in 1969, was illiterate but kind-hearted. She was his only daughter, and he loved her dearly. Her father often visited her even after the accident that claimed his life. The accident was widely reported, and on that fateful day, it wasn't her father driving, but another driver with him. This driver caused the accident. According to her, each trip required 2 drivers to take turns. For instance, her father would drive from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., then hand over to the other driver. Nothing unusual happened until 2016, 2 years after the accident. On that day, her father was driving near the high van pass when suddenly two large birds flew straight into the windshield and died. Her father got out to check if they were alive, but they were dead. Sensing a bad omen, he immediately prayed by the roadside, hoping for a safe journey home. Although the trip ended safely, upon returning home, he visited a temple to ward off bad luck. After the bird incident, her father's business declined, and he faced financial difficulties. He became irritable and often swore, which was unlike him. 2 years later, she got married and had a child. Her father adored his grandchild and was very affectionate. That year, she checked their horoscopes and realized it was a challenging year for both of them, sharing the same zodiac sign and facing a difficult period called Tam Tai. During her pregnancy, she frequently dreamt of a funeral at home, seeing her father's photo, which terrified her. She feared losing her father, who meant everything to her. After giving birth, her father lovingly bought many clothes for his grandchild, which fit even when the child was 2 years old. The day before her father's last trip, he seemed unusually affectionate, kissing his grandchild and stroking her hair as if saying goodbye. As he left for the trip, he kept looking back at their home with a sense of longing. Later, her mother recounted that during the drive to the bus station, her father expressed reluctance about the trip, saying he didn't want to go. Seeing how much he missed his grandchildren, he didn't want to drive. But if he didn't take this trip, how would he pay off his debts and take care of the kids? Hearing this, my mother felt compassion, but my father had to make the trip to earn money for the family. When she drove him to the vehicle, he told the workers loading the goods to hurry up. He said, "This might be my last trip. I'm quitting driving because it's a thankless job, but I need this trip to earn money for my family." Little did anyone know, those words would mark a lifetime separation between you and your father. As your father began his journey, sitting next to another driver, back home, your child was crying inconsolably. You remembered your father and called him, asking him to record a message for your child. When your father sent the recording, your child immediately calmed down, recognizing his grandfather's voice. However, that recording turned out to be the last one you would ever receive from your father. Only 20 minutes after your call, a tragic accident occurred. Your father, feeling sleepy, asked the other driver to take over. Within 10 minutes, the other driver lost control and crashed the vehicle, causing a severe accident. Your father was critically injured when a metal rod pierced his lung, and he was rushed to the hospital in Hue. You received a call informing you of the accident, but you couldn't believe it, thinking it was impossible since you had just spoken to him. Despite trying to reassure yourself, you were deeply shaken when you handed the phone to your mother. The vehicle owner assured her that your father was fine, just hospitalized for observation. Feeling uneasy, you urged your mother to go to Hue immediately. Later, you learned that before your mother arrived, the vehicle owner had coerced your father into signing some documents related to insurance compensation, exploiting his illiteracy. Meanwhile, your mother borrowed money and hitchhiked to Hue since there was no money for a plane ticket. It took her 2 days to reach the hospital. During that time, your father was still conscious in the ICU, and you could speak to him. You pleaded with him not to leave you, and he told you to take care of your children, saying your mother could manage on her own. Strangely, after those words, he began addressing you by name instead of calling himself father. 2 days later, your mother arrived in Hue, but she had to take a motorcycle taxi to the hospital. Upon reaching the hospital, she learned your father had fallen into a deep coma. The doctors advised that if he didn't wake up by that evening, the family should prepare to bring him home. Your mother was devastated, and upon hearing the news, you were in disbelief, insisting your father must survive. In the ICU, only one family member was allowed to visit briefly each day. You asked your mother to secretly bring a phone to your father's bedside so you could speak to him. When you asked him if he was leaving you, your mother saw him shed tears. Despite being in a deep coma, your father's love for you was evident. However, your conversation was brief, as your mother gently reminded you of the situation. The doctor advised the family to take the person home because he was brain dead. They administered a revival shot and transported him home to pass away there. The mother, having prepared mentally, arranged transportation for the father. On the way home, you called your mother to put the phone by your father's ear, urging him to return home. If he passed away on the road, his spirit might not find its way back. The journey from Hugh to your home was long, taking 2 days. At exactly 1:27 a.m., your father passed away in the vehicle. You only learned of his passing after your mother brought him home. During the journey, you couldn't reach your mother despite repeated calls. Coincidentally, around the same time your father passed, you felt a sharp pain in your heart and heard persistent knocking at your window, though no one was there. It was a frightening experience. When your father's body was brought home, your grandmother's house did not allow the funeral there, so it was moved to your paternal grandmother's house. Upon arrival, your father's body was stiff. You helped clean him and laid him down gently. He looked peaceful, as if sleeping. Your aunts suggested taking a commemorative photo with him, but when the photos were checked, all faces appeared blurred or darkened, so they were deleted. It was known that your father disliked being photographed. The funeral lasted 3 days. The driver who transported your father came to pay respects and mentioned the hospital expenses, totaling 50 million VND. He gave you 37 million VND, but your aunts took 30 million, leaving you with only 7 million. They later demanded the remaining 7 million, claiming it was needed for the funeral. Despite your pleas to keep it for your child's needs, they took all the money. You noticed the lights flickering during these exchanges, but returning to normal afterward. You felt frustrated, knowing you needed to contribute to the funeral, but it was modest and didn't require all the money. After the burial, your aunts told you they wouldn't help in future ceremonies. Your father, who loved you dearly, seemed to stay with you even after passing. You dreamt of him holding your child tightly, leading to frequent hospital visits due to fevers. Your grandmother consulted a spiritual advisor who suggested your father lingered out of love and concern. The advisor recommended scattering rice and salt around the house. In the house, every night before you sleep, take a clove of garlic, split it in half, and rub it along your spine. Every time your grandmother did this with a clove of garlic along your back, it felt very hot, and wherever she applied it, red bruises appeared. It covered your whole back, and you were very scared. However, after doing this a few times, you no longer felt that your father was around, and you also got better, no longer having fevers. After these events, you learned that your father, after passing away, was very spiritual. The drivers who worked with him would gather to eat and drink, and during these sessions, they would speak ill of your father. Normally, you wouldn't know about these conversations, but they kept criticizing him, saying things like he was foolish, always eating and sleeping, and that he deserved to have had an accident. Despite the fact that he had just passed away, they spoke harshly. Your father was very proud and never allowed anyone to speak ill of him. So, after these drivers gathered and spoke poorly of him, they continued their journey, and their vehicle suddenly broke down on a deserted road. They couldn't start it again despite multiple attempts. At that point, they became scared and wondered if your father's spirit was playing tricks on them because of their words. In fear, they decided to call your father's phone number, which you kept after his passing. When the phone rang, you answered, and they pleaded with you to ask your father to forgive them, as they were drunk and didn't mean what they said. You advised them to sincerely apologize and offer some fruit as a gesture. After they did this, their vehicle started working again. They called you to confirm that everything was fine, making you believe that your father's spirit had indeed intervened. Since then, those drivers never dared to mention your father in their conversations again. You noticed that even though you kept your father's phone, you occasionally received calls from unknown numbers, but no one would speak on the other end. Later, you heard from someone that the drivers often mocked your father for being illiterate, which led him to sign some papers without understanding them. You felt upset, but didn't know what those papers were about. However, you mentioned the insurance money. Since your father drove long distances, he had accident and vehicle insurance. When he died, the insurance payout was kept by the vehicle owner, who only gave your family a small amount during the funeral, which seemed less than the insurance should have been. Additionally, the fellow drivers who couldn't attend the funeral pooled their money for a condolence gift, but the vehicle owner kept that money too. Since everything had passed, you and your mother didn't pursue it further. You later learned that the vehicle owner would occasionally receive calls from your father's number, even though you never called him. One time, after receiving several calls, the owner called back in fear, asking if you were the one calling. You assured him you weren't. Eventually, he was so frightened that he blocked the number. About 6 months later, you had a dream like watching a movie. In it, you saw your father's vehicle getting into an accident. The car was swerving before it crashed and overturned. This scene was brief, and then you saw your father signing a paper with the vehicle owner, where your father signed first. What you have experienced. You realized on the day of the funeral that the paper was signed by the owner of the car, promising compensation if anything happened to your father. However, he did not help your family after your father passed away, seemingly embezzling money. In your dream, you asked the driver who caused the accident, and he said it was due to avoiding a truck, not reckless driving. Everything has passed, but reflecting on the car owner, you believe in karma. A year after your father's death, your mother attended a wedding of a fellow driver's son. She saw the car owner looking much thinner and wearing dark glasses, with one eye blinded due to an accident involving granite. He lost business as his drivers left him for lacking compassion. As for the driver involved in the accident with your father, you hold no grudge, but he avoided your family out of fear. A year and a half later, he was involved in another accident, hitting a 51-year-old man who died instantly. The man was at fault, so the driver didn't face jail but quit driving out of fear. Regarding your father's spirit, you're unsure if he has found peace. Since his passing, you often dream of him taking you to the temple, and you believe he is on a long journey. As the anniversary of his death approaches each year, a butterfly visits you, just like the one you sent a picture of to Duway. It circles around you before disappearing, returning annually. After your father's death, you discovered 2 of his shirts, found by your 2-year-old child. Ultimately, those who have erred have faced their consequences. You feel sorrow and regret for not having the chance to repay your father. Our story ends here. A rather sad tale, right? Before concluding, don't forget to like and subscribe to Dewey's YouTube channel. If you enjoyed the story, leave a comment below for everyone to see. Let's look forward to more captivating stories to come. Goodbye, everyone.